Whoa. Hello.
Oh,
Hey, Jen. Hello, everybody else. We are live, by the way. That's why I was so shocked. I just ran away to pee and was immediately told to come back. So we're here, we're doing it. Nice to meet you all, and thank you all for attending. My name's Ben. I work at Klue. I'm a CSM at Klue. You can reach out to me at any time. And I'm joined by the lovely Jess, Jess, I was thinking about your intro and I was like, where do I even start? She's like super mom, like a previous military, just like a dope person. Obviously, customer insights manager at HubSpot. Did I miss anything? Am I missing something of your background?
uh, I am a gardener extraordinaire. It's gardening season for those of you that live in the Northern Hemisphere, so excited about that.
So now I have like a few questions that we're going to get through today. Should I add gardening related tips
Yeah,
to this?
yeah, sure.
Sweet.
That's
And just
called houseplants. I'm not great with houseplants. I keep killing them. So,
by the way, to the folks in the audience, and I think last I checked, there was 278,000 of you. This is an Ask the Panel style of session. So if you have questions for Jess about win-loss program, about your competitive enablement program, really any of the other topics that we're going to be covering today, please put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. I have 3 monitors right now, and I had a dream that I lost the questions last night. So hopefully that doesn't happen today. But let's get into it, Jess. So nice to see you. Your role has recently expanded to the customer insights manager at HubSpot. Where do you see buyer insights from win-loss specifically fitting into your role today?
yeah, so previously I was the manager of the competitive intelligence team, and now my expanded role includes competitive intelligence, market research, and customer data. So win loss fits perfectly in there because those are all inputs into strategy, decision making. So, along with competitive intelligence and market research, win loss, and customer data, it fits really nicely in there. We're getting direct feedback from customers, and it's just like another data point to help drive that strategy.
Yeah, it's funny. For folks that were in the product session just before this, we did talk about like automated insights, so review insights, and how we can start to look at what other types of data sources exist that we can extract insights from. So I think to your point, it's like even more valuable to have win-loss insights living in the same place that we can try and leverage some of the same tools with. I just have some questions. Like, I mean, I could go on for hours about like there are so many tools and strategies and programs that you can prioritize as a business. So without revealing HubSpot's master plans, why did win loss become something that like strategically was important to prioritize?
Yeah, I think everyone here that's listening knows like it is difficult sometimes to get programs approved, especially when you're not gonna necessarily get like a hard output that you're like, here is the output. Like I am immediately directing, my sales. So you have to kind of like link it and show, okay, this is going to have a feedback loop to sales. This is going to help them. And then I think like highlighting some others immediately when people think win loss, they think competitive intelligence, they think enablement. But I think there's like a lot of other different stakeholders that win loss serves. One, strategy teams, executive teams. They really like having data and they like having a customer voice to that data. So I think the difference between doing like regular market research or competitive research is like it's data, it's numbers, it's a chart on the screen. Whereas win loss, it's a person. It becomes a quote, it becomes a persona, it becomes an actual company. And I think people respond so much better to that than just like hard data. So I would say it's easier to kind of say, okay, well, we already are doing this market research. And then in addition to that, this is validation to that market research. I think that's a good way to look at it. And then also like the same way that you validate or you say like here's the ROI on market research. I think you can lump it into that group and say this is just another part of the market research. Before we make expensive, big decisions, we need data to help drive those decisions. And one piece of that data is getting feedback on why we're winning and losing deals, and help use that to drive strategy.
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking about, we always talk internally about taking a strength or weakness from object or subjective to objective. So, all the research that you've done, everything that the market's saying, everything that competitors are putting out there, your strengths are typically subjective. This is why we know we win. When we can contribute win-loss insights, we create a more subjective or an objective perspective. Like we're hearing this from people. This is why we win and lose. You said something in there though that I wanted to dig into. You mentioned about like leadership, what leadership expects from win-loss, what they can garner from win-loss. Can you get into any bit about really sort of the deliverable for leadership and what they're expecting from this program? Because I think it helps for strategy and decision making, but I do wonder, like, what is it specifically that you're delivering for them that they're finding valuable?
Yeah, so I think like the answer to that kind of lies in what you said previously, which is about like adding the objective approach. So we deliver a competitive update. Our strategy, we partner with our strategy team, deliver a competitive update to our leadership and our board every quarter. And one input into that, is the data, is like, here's the percentage we're winning, here's the percentage we're losing, and all of that. But like you said, it that's objective, that's fine. But then having like a quote on there, on the we're losing this percentage of deals, and then having a quote from a loss interview, or then having the same thing for a win interview, it really like, I think even executives and the board, like they see graphs all day, right? They see data all day and it's just like, okay, why should I care about this? But when you add that quote, when you add that synopsis and a specific company, like it makes it more real. And it's not just like one deal out of thousands that we, or I shouldn't say that, you know what I mean? One deal out of many that we lost. But like, it becomes personal. It becomes like that single deal. It becomes, like a real event, as opposed to just like, okay, here's a graph that shows like our win rate's going up, we're losing, it's going down. It's really like the why to it instead of just numbers. It's like, okay, we can put text on the screen that's like why, but when we really like link it back to a company and a deal and the image, it becomes like a real thing in their minds and a little bit more tangible and have a little bit more value and weight.
I love that you just said that. I had a late night conversation with Jason, our CEO, last night, and that's not supposed to sound weird. It came out weird, but it's not supposed to sound weird. And he talks about that often. He says like the sting for executives is the one deal, like that, you lost this deal this quarter. This was a make or break deal. Like that really stings. And so I love that maybe I don't love it, but I appreciate that that's the perspective as well. Cause I think that's something that does resonate is like, yes, data as a whole is important, but like tying it back to specific instances that really burn and sort of make you want to drive change. I think that's exactly how we look at it as well. There's a lot of alignment there.
I think like, well, just going back to that, like executives don't become executives without being people oriented and relationship oriented. So there's very few executives out there that don't have that mindset. So I think bringing it back to like a person and relationships and individual deals, like that helps add more weight to them.
Yeah, we also, in the same conversation, we talked about like what executives need to know about CI. And by the way, there are questions in the chat. I'll get to them very shortly. And keep them coming, please. We talked about executives and CI and like what sort of CI executives need. And we sort of broke it down internally. Like there's strategic, there's deal support, and there's like non-deal support. Like what do they need to know? I'd be curious about your take. And I know this is kind of like not a question we talked about in advance, but I'd be curious about your take about like, what really do executives need to know relative to CI? Win-loss is a key insight, of course. Like, do they need, strengths and weaknesses, or do they just need info for strategic decision-making? What do they do?
So we look at trends. So we don't get too in the weeds about like, here's the exact numbers, this quarter versus last quarter, because I think what's really important is like, are we trending up? Are we trending down? And why? Are there any anomalies in the data? Are there any like major major strategic launches or like pivots that competitors have done. I think that's really important because we need to figure out, are we in line? Are we responding? And then another thing to think about, and this isn't like a quarterly thing, this is maybe once or twice a year, is benchmarking us against competitors, like on a big strategic level. So in our case, that would be like a platform level, like across all of our products. And just making sure, are we on par? Are we making the right decisions? Are we falling behind? Are we ahead? Where are we ahead? I think like that's the level that you need to think about. And sometimes that gets a little bit overwhelming when you're also in charge of competitive enablement, which is so tactical. So I think win-loss is a really good way to like draw the line between that tactical enablement and the strategic executive.
It's honestly like we did not rehearse this. I wrote in a deck 2 days ago, tactical versus strategic. So the fact that you're speaking the same language, I think it's a universal challenge for companies to solve. Kind of in that same vein, there's a question in the chat about your take on the value of win-loss insights over a different input. Could be any input. What do you think?
I think that the more data you have, the better. I do think that there can be a tendency across in every company I've been in, every organization, to like drink your own Kool-Aid. And sometimes CI professionals are the people that have to be the bearer of bad news. Like, hey, you're drinking the wrong Kool-Aid, or like, we're not as good as what you think we are, or we're not competing well in this, or like, hey, this is an area that we don't necessarily focus on, but we're really winning. And this keeps getting brought up, and maybe this is a competitive advantage that we haven't really thought about. So I think that's really important to think of it that way. But at the same point, like, I think that win-loss pairs really well with, like, we just ran our annual competitive NPS survey. I think it pairs really well with that when it comes to like data. These are the data points, and then here's the like individual person, the quote. So I don't think you can have one without the other. Like, I don't think you can just have win-loss standalone without the data, because then it's like, it's just a couple deals, that you're having these interviews on. But when you overlay that on top of like the data, that's when it really adds a lot more color.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, and shout out to Rachel here. Rachel on your team, what a stud! Yes. I hope she's in the audience. Rachel, you're the best. How have you seen an improvement in your quality of content? And this kind of ties to some of the other questions. Like, how have you seen an improvement when you start to tie in that win-loss data?
Yeah, I think like for us on our competitive team, it definitely adds a level of credibility and confidence when we're like, okay, these are our strengths on our battle card against a competitor. And then we do a win-loss interview where we do it in the win-loss program, and we find like, yeah, those were our weaknesses that were brought up. And then those were our strengths. Like, this is why we're losing, this is why we're winning. And it's just like, oh, okay. Sometimes you're like, it feels like you're just like holding your finger up in the wind in CI, and you're just like, I think this is right. Like, we have stuff but sometimes you just like, you have that lack of confidence, and to be able to say like, yeah, here are our strengths, here are weaknesses. And not only am I backing this up with like my experience and research, et cetera, I also have like this other input that provides a little bit more confidence. And then it just makes it easier to like promote and back those and just have confidence in your program.
Yeah. And I wonder too, because like reps are seeing the outcome of that win-loss program that you're running, are you finding maybe, and honestly, this might even be a Rachel question if she's in the chat, but are you finding more willingness to contribute and be a part of the win-loss program and introduce, the team to their prospects and buyers because they're seeing the output? They're seeing that this isn't a punishment. It's like we all are here to get better, 1% better every day. Has there been any change in seller behavior as a result of your win-loss program becoming part of your content?
Yeah, I think like what helps with that is having at least in our organization, it depends on the size of your organization, but is like top-down support. So having executive interest is important, because then that like trickles down, right? Sometimes you can do it from like bottom up, but I think trickle down is helpful. And I think like the more, like you said, the more outputs we put out, the more they're like, oh, okay, this is not like a slap on the wrist, for losing this deal. It's important, like as an organization and as a team, for us to like learn and improve. If it's like a lost deal, everyone loves sharing win deals. Everyone loves being like, I won this big deal. Look, like that's not hard. It's the lost ones that are hard to get.
Yeah, I love that perspective because we talk a lot about a competitive culture. Like it's when you're creating a strong competitive culture, if your compete program is at a really low stage of maturity, you have to train the muscle. You have to train the competitive culture. And that comes from, reps being willing to share and contribute and sort of face the realities and share intel back. And I think win-loss is a great sort of end result of that, is like once they know that what they're doing, what they're exposing the win-loss team to with their buyers and prospects can contribute to growth of the company, growth of individuals, as well as like actual competitive plays. Feels like, it's a perfect reward system. Question from the chat. So someone says, Jess, what external research sources do you find the most valuable and accurate? There's a lot of pay to play out there.
Oh man. Okay. So I guess like I have like a follow-up question on that, but like external research, I mean, what we find the most accurate really is like primary research. Like it's nice if you're doing like strategic level research, like analyst reports are nice. But if you're doing like competitive research and you really want to do like benchmarking or at scale, like interview customers, I think market research is the best way to do that. It's expensive. So there's that, but it's like, I mean, it's pretty valuable. Like you can, especially when you can cut the data multiple ways. And then, like I said, just layering that win-loss on top of that data is great. So we do our own primary research with tools like Qualtrics.
Cool. And then you said you had a follow-up question. I don't know if you'll.
It was just like, I think if we're talking more about like enablement, like doing research for enablement, I would say one of the things, and this is funny because we were just talking about this before the session, but like going to competitor events, like doing.
I seeded this question in the chat.
Going to competitor events, reading their newsletters, all their like consuming all
being
their
a spy.
Okay. Yeah. Not to like give away my background, but yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and I guess like you just attend, take as many notes as possible, do some analysis, contribute it. What's the deliverable of that? Is it updating battle cards? Is it is it multiple different deliverables?
So like if there's any big product launches, we update battle cards. Sometimes if it's a really big event, we'll like go on our competitive Slack channel and we'll like do a summary of what we saw, and then we always do why this matters for HubSpot, and then here's some talking points for how to respond to these launches or this marketing campaign or whatever. So we always like close that loop there. It's not just because we're not reporters, we're not news reporters, we're analysts, right? We give insights. We don't just like report the news.
I love that. That's like to the 282,000 of you in here. The why it matters is critical. That's like, what do you do with this information? A feed of raw intelligence is good. Insight is really what moves the needle. So just before we move on from this too far, someone in the chat said, Jess mentioned a competitive NPS survey. Can she speak a little bit more about what that is exactly? Familiar with NPS, but I'm curious to understand the competitive element that she noted.
Yeah, so a competitive NPS, so like NPS, obviously you go to your customers and you say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you recommend HubSpot? A competitive NPS, we go and we actually talk to people that use our competitor software too, and we say, how likely you'd recommend, insert competitor name here. And then we compare NPSs, that's the benchmarking that I was talking about. Another great thing you can do is ask about what we call drivers. So like different features, like customizability, support that may like drive an NPS score. And then you can see how you compare to competitors on those features as well.
Yeah, love that. Another question in the chat. How to make sure that we don't make big strategy decisions on wrong opinions of our clients, especially when we don't have a lot of short-term clients and have more long-term clients?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So I'm going to bring this back to like my background. In military intelligence, there's kind of like a rule. You never make a decision based on one source. like one data source. You always have multiple data sources to back up a major strategic decision. So you're not going to have one win-loss interview saying one thing and then like pivot your entire company strategy based on that. You're going to, like I talked about before, you're going to layer that win-loss onto other data sources, what you already know about the market, your experience, etc. And you're going to make decisions based on that. So you never should make a decision based on like one data point. You should always have multiple data points.
Yeah, cool. Don't forget, folks, there's only a few minutes left. So if you have more questions for Jess, Jess, what's your home address just so people could find you at? I'm just kidding. If you have more questions for Jess, now's the time to ask it. So feel free.
Yeah. If you're in the Philly area, we can grab a coffee. Yeah.
It almost became a threat when you said you're in the Philly area.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do have a question, and this is something that I hear a lot. Oh, actually, sorry, before I talk, there's a follow-up on the competitor NPS. How are you identifying competitor customers to survey?
We use a third party like market research firm to help us find those customers.
Cool. Question I get a lot, and we'll wrap up here shortly. How do you deal with reps that are unwilling to introduce you to their buyers?
Ooh, well, I think, we try to persuade them, like we try to talk to them about like the benefit, and basically like what we're going to be doing is not going to be like invasive. Maybe show them the questions that we're going to be asking, show them some outputs of some previous work, and like also talk to them about like what this is going to be used for. So yeah, I would say like just, and then in the end, like if they don't want to, they don't want to. And that's, you have to respect their relationship. They worked hard for that relationship. But I think just being really transparent and being like, here's what we're going to ask, here's what the output is going to be, here's what we're going to use it for, and here's like the impact that will have, is the best way to do it.
Yeah, love that. Love that. You got to build that trust. And I think that comes too with like the strength of a CI program. I mean, you've spent years building trust with your sellers, and they know that, again, that competitive culture muscle, they know that what they're contributing to is for the better good of everybody. So I love that. Question here about uncovering findings from your win-loss interviews that go beyond what you'd initially scoped. I know we always talk about having a clear hypothesis going into it. Have you found that you're sort of answering the questions that you went into it with, or that we're learning things that weren't initially in scope? And we have about 1 minute.
We are mostly validating, which is good. It kind of makes me wipe my brow and be like, all right, we're on the right track. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and it helps to have just some hypothesis going into a program. Like we have some strategic direction of learning objectives. Okay, Jess, appreciate your time. We'll have to do another session for gardening tips. Folks, appreciate everybody being here, all 282,000 of you. We have another session coming up with Robin Welfare, who's lovely, and Dylan Durso from Autodesk coming up. So please join that. And in the meantime, if you want to check out more win-loss resources, head to our booth in the sponsor section. And if you want to talk to someone about win-loss from Klue, Andrew is available in the roundtable section right now. Thanks so much, folks.
Thanks.